It is Thursday, August 14th here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I am Jamie Steyer Johnson, and for the first time in a while, I am alongside Richard Cohen. So, Richard, good to be able to catch back up with you, get some of your thoughts here. We were kind of planning out, okay, what do we talk about today? And I think there's some pretty obvious headlines, and a lot of that has to do with the trajectories of some of these teams in the WNBA as we head down the home stretch of the regular season. And we're starting to see the ads for the playoffs coming on ESPN, which is always a little bit crazy since that starts, I guess, a month from today. Which I'm gonna try not to think about too much because time is flying. But two teams, two trajectories, neither of them particularly positive, that we really wanted to highlight. And those being the New York Liberty falling out of the second seed as of last night, and then the Seattle Storm potentially falling out of the playoffs. And so let's start with the Liberty. Obviously, a significant amount of injuries, real just kind of tough ones mounting up there. Getting Kennedy Burke back is definitely going to help there. And Emma Meesseman finding her rhythm in New York. But even so, the Atlanta Dream have now moved into second place. So what are you seeing from the Liberty? Do you think, all right, are they going to be able to make a push and end up back in that 2 seed? Or do we potentially see them falling down to the 3 or even 4?
I think the main thing we're seeing is just how important Breanna Stewart is to them, to basically any team she's on. Once she's been out, especially their defense has really dropped off. Jonquel Jones looks slow without Breanna Stewart alongside her to help anchor the back of that defense. It might depend on how quickly Stewart is back, whether they can get back into the 2. I think they're probably going to prioritize getting healthy for the playoffs rather than where they end up in the seeding, because they'll back themselves to beat somebody if on the road if they need to in a series in the playoffs, once assuming they can actually get the whole squad together. The way they've looked lately, I'm not convinced they're going to necessarily jump back into that second seed. They can still beat anyone, but they've looked fallible basically in recent games.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Definitely, Jonquel Jones has not quite looked like herself in a lot of ways. Where we see, okay, yes, the versatility of Breanna Stewart allows Jonquel to do the things that she does really well. And I mean, that was earlier in the season. We saw how crucial she was to the success of New York when Jonquel was out. And now it's kind of similar and almost worse in a way because you're also out Niara Sabali, and then the times without Burke were really tough. And so just having those injuries, it's not just the one, it's having them pile up. I think that has really been tough for New York to overcome. And I think the other side of that coin, as far as specifically the second seed goes, is the Atlanta Dream have been playing so well. They really seem to have kind of found their footing. They get Ryan Howard back. Jordan Canada goes out, and it's just kind of next player up. You know, when you have Maya Caldwell playing really well, Nas Hillman playing really well, and then you get BG back. You've got Brianna Jones doing just terrific things, I think, game in and game out. I've been really impressed with the rhythm that Atlanta has found. And at this point, I would certainly not be at all surprised if they're able to maintain that second seed. And it's just nice to see a little bit of consistency in a season where it feels like almost no one has had any. And I was kind of just waiting for like someone to hit a rhythm. And I guess it's going to be Atlanta, at least for right now. Just won their 6th straight last night.
And they've managed to do it despite the injuries, like you say,
Yeah.
with Howard being out for a month. Canada's been in and out all season. Griner missed a few games recently. And they've just inserted people whenever they've needed to. Caldwell played a stretch of games. Pau started here and there. And Atlanta have managed to keep rolling. We saw it with Golden State as well. Some teams are able to sort of suffer these injuries and keep they're sort of same level up. And yeah, New York, there's been the pretty glaring drop off since they've lost Stewart and had the other injuries piling up on top. Even though like every other team would love to have an Emma Miesemann coming in to try and help cover these holes. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time for sort of everyone else to get used to how Emma plays and for her to get used to the team as well. But yeah, they've not quite managed to keep the same rhythm going like a lot of teams have.
And I think that part of it that's tough too is that it's a very different proposition to be coming into a team that has some pretty major gaps and that's trying to work through those injuries as opposed to coming into kind of that well-oiled machine that we were seeing from New York when everyone was healthy. And so for Emma Meesman, it's not just, okay, I can kind of take my time and get integrated. Like they're not forcing her in for 40 minutes a game immediately, but they're looking to her for a lot. And like you said, it's not like she's been playing with this team all season. She has some familiarity from past overseas seasons with some of the players on this team, but I mean, it takes time to get that figured out. And I thought, especially late in the game last night against Las Vegas, there were a couple of possessions where there was just that disconnect. There was
Yeah.
one late where you saw Emma looking for Natasha Cloud on a backdoor who was completely not looking. And then just the clear frustration on Emma's face. And not, I think, with Natasha, I think just with the situation with herself for throwing a pass when her teammate wasn't looking. And that is really hard. Like, that's a tough way to build chemistry when you feel like there's a lot of weight on your shoulders, when you feel like, okay, this isn't just, oh, we want to get stuff figured out. It's like this is significantly affecting our playoff standings. We don't have a specific timeline on when Brianna Stewart might be back. She's saying she wants to be back before the end of the month, but you can only take that with a grain of salt. And so I think it's really tough to be in Emma Miesemann's position where you can impact this team in such a huge way. Was the leading scorer last night, had 24 points, shooting 8 of 15, had 10 rebounds. But that's, again, you just got there. Like, that's a lot to be asking of someone.
Yeah, I mean, she's played pretty well, to be
Mhm.
fair. I mean, but yeah, like you say, the the sort of inbuilt chemistry that you get from playing with teammates week in week out and in practice, and yeah, that's you can see that's not there. I know exactly the play you're talking about with Cloud and that pass that just sort of sailed out of bounds while Cloud was wondering what was going on and where the ball was. Yeah, and yeah, that chemistry isn't there yet, and with I've always said that part of the point of these super teams that New York put together is that you can suffer these injuries and tell players to take their time because you got so much other talent on the roster that you can keep winning anyway. You may not win quite as much as you would with everybody around, but you should be able to still be a top of the standings kind of team, even missing a player or two. But I think yeah, we've hit a point where New York have hit a rough stretch at the same time as missing multiple players, and it's yeah they've seen them drop. I don't think they'll as long as they're expecting everyone to be healthy when they need them to be. I don't think they'll be too worried because they'll think they can win a championship from the fourth seed, the fifth seed anyway. That's part of the point of the whole US sports system is that the only games that really matter are the ones at the end of the season, as long
Mhm.
as you're involved. But yeah, obviously, at the very least, you want to stay 2 or 3 so that you don't have to play Minnesota in the semifinals. You can at least stay out of that lane until the final stage.
Yeah, yeah, that would certainly be a big boost. And so it'll be interesting to see how they continue to find some of that chemistry, what they get with Kennedy Burke back, which last night was her first time back playing. Went over 3 for the 3-point line, which obviously is not what we were seeing earlier in the season. A really just poor 3-point shooting game from New York, 7 for 25 from distance, including Ofer from Kennedy Burke, Natasha Cloud, and Jonquil Jones combined. So I think that part of that is pretty solid focus on defense from the Aces, but also they're probably gonna hit one of those 10 shots between the three of them in most games. So that would certainly make a really big difference. So let's talk about Seattle, which we mentioned Atlanta a little bit as the team that moved into the second seed, and they did that by beating Seattle last night. And then they're actually going to turn around and play each other again tomorrow because why not? But Seattle is going through it a little bit, have now lost 6 straight, diametrically opposite trajectories for Seattle and Atlanta, where Atlanta won their 6 straight, Seattle losing their 6 straight. And not just struggles on the floor, but certainly some potentially concerning reporting. It was reported that Alicia Clark actually had requested her trade out of Seattle. Kristen, who does Off the Record it's an independent outlet. He had talked to some league sources, had some sources around the team telling him that there were altercations potentially in the locker room, just displeasure with some people's performance. And I think coming on the heels of the investigation off of Jewel Lloyd's accusations last year. And then when you see what's happening on the court, it's hard not to be very concerned with the potential in Seattle right now. I mean, for what they have, it seems ridiculous to be talking about Seattle missing the playoffs. But based on what we've seen recently and the schedule they have remaining to the end of the season, I think that's a very realistic scenario, which is kind of crazy for a team with Skylar Diggins, Neko Gumake, Erica Wheeler playing the way she has. I mean, go on down the list. It's kind of a crazy situation, I think, to be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate a little bit, there's been a lot of bad luck in this run. They lost the first 5 games of that 6-game run by a combined 15 points, which is ridiculous for a 5-game run. They're a better team than their record. And you look at the deeper stats. There's a thing called Pythagorean record, which is basically where they use points difference to decide what your record ought to be if it's sort of rounded out rather than just being wins and losses. Mm-hmm. And this is a 19-14 team by that measure. And they were 19-12 a couple of days ago before the last couple of games. But ultimately, especially this late in the season, you got to worry about what your record actually is in the standings because, as you say, they're starting to get perilously close to the edge of the playoffs, and LA are looking good behind them as sort of that looming 9th seed. The off-court stuff is concerning, as you say, to a certain extent, because at some point there is so much smoke that you have to worry about what the hell is going on with the fire underneath. To be honest, I've said for 3-4 years that I wondered if Noelle Quinn was going to keep her job, and she's still there. It's who knows whether they eventually make a change there. They clearly like her a lot because they've backed her through all of this stuff, all of the Lloyd events through that horrible season where Jewel Lloyd basically took 50 shots a game because there was no one else to take any, and they lost a lot. And they've stuck with Quinn. Maybe from their perspective, she's the one who's been holding it together. She's the one who's kept this team afloat despite all of the smoke and the events that we've heard about from behind the scenes. But yeah, I would expect, even with only 11, 12 games left, that the luck evens out and this team makes the playoffs because they are still one of the best, probably 6 teams in the league, never mind one of the top 8. But yeah, you have to start worrying about it once you're running out of games to prove that you're that good, because it doesn't always even out by the end of the season. We're not playing an infinite number of games before we hit the playoffs.
Exactly. And I mean, the other thing is when you talk about who's around them in the standings right now, LA, as you said, playing really pretty well and fairly consistently, and also has played well against Seattle, has been able to get those 2 wins in the past however many games, 6 or so games against Seattle. And so at the very worst, they're going to be even in their season series. And so You're not going to have the easy tiebreaker there, and very well could lose the tiebreaker depending on how their next matchup goes. So I don't know. I think that for the talent, for what they have, for what they've shown, I agree. They definitely are one of the, top half teams in the league. Especially, I mean, we're talking about a 6-game losing streak when Dominique Malonga is really kind of getting her feet under her, when she's had some incredible games. And I said the other day, like, it really is such a shame that that is being overshadowed because of the fact that they haven't been able to execute and haven't been able to finish these games out. Because, man, is she showing, first of all, why they let her take the time they did to really get acclimated in not forcing her in full go immediately, and also showing why she was such a highly touted prospect, why she was taken second overall. I mean, you are seeing the not just potential, but like the star power right now from Dominique Malonga. And so it is kind of wild when you say, yeah, losing by a combined 15 points over 5 games. Like, that is crazy. You also say, okay, at a certain point, is there an element of your late game execution, of
Yeah. Can you
your
just not
game
close out?
management?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. It's so mind-blowing for what that team is to be having this conversation at all.
I mean, even last night's game was basically a toss up until that period where Howard hits three threes in 30 seconds at the end of the third quarter that basically, yeah, broke it open and Seattle never got back level. But yeah, this is a team that I think should still make the playoffs. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see because it's getting tight and they're running out of games.
Yeah,
And as you say, that they're losing the tiebreaker to basically every team around them.
mhm.
They're at best going to tie with Vegas, Indiana, Golden State, LA, Washington. Yeah, they're either going to lose or tie the tiebreakers to all those teams. So 2-way or 3-way tiebreakers are not likely to be in their favor.
Oh, it's wild. I don't know. There's a lot happening there. I do want to touch on from last night, really quick. Yeah, you mentioned that run from Ryan Howard. That was one of the wildest brief sequences I've ever seen. That to me is almost indicative of some of the issues we've seen from Seattle, which is she hits a shot, she hits another shot on the next possession, and then you throw the ball away. She just hangs around at the very end of the third quarter. Ryan Howard hits a shot in the half court, comes down, hits another three in the half court, and then there's not even 5 seconds left. Seattle takes it out, just kind of lackadaisical inbound pass, and she's just hanging around. I really think to make sure that they're not even getting up a half court heave, and instead sees the opportunity to steal the inbound pass and hits another three. So goes on a 9-0 run of her own in 30 seconds. And this is a game where the final margin was 10 points. So that, yeah, is extremely consequential. So I don't know, just it's the little things where every play in a game matters. Just because it's later in the game, just because it's a late clock thing, doesn't mean that it matters more than others. But I do feel like sometimes there's maybe a lack of care, or maybe things just snowballing where there's that little
Yeah.
bit of frustration. You say, oh man, we gave up 2 shots. This is tough, man. What a tough ending to the third quarter. And the third quarter isn't over, and you throw the ball away to give her yet another shot. And from there, it's like, okay, that's just kind of a backbreaker. Like, where do you go from here?
Yeah, I mean the second one banked in off the glass as well, so I
Right.
think there was an extra element of frustration there because it was like, how the hell did that go in? And then yeah, then you throw it away and give up another one. I think you see that same thing in the 6-game losing streak. In that, even if you have been unlucky, it's hard to internalize that. All you feel as a player is we've lost 5 games in a row, and that starts to hurt, especially if you're losing every game to a last second shot or to you missing a last second shot because that's a backbreaker. The same thing as Howard hitting that last second three. That hurts and that starts to pile up, and then everyone starts to feel that it's a mental thing at some point, and then it becomes hard to turn around.
Yeah, very much a mental thing. And Speaking of, another team that you mentioned as we were prepping for this episode that I want to make sure we cover as well, the Las Vegas Aces. They have had a pretty significant turnaround, I think, just with the way they're play like they just seem like they are kind of back to their groove. They look a lot more confident. And this is a team that we talked about earlier in the season, potentially being out of the playoff race. Well, now they're knocking on the door of they very well could break into the top 4. Like they could end up with home court in the playoffs. And even if they don't, they aren't secured, but the way they're playing, the way their schedule lines up, they look like a fairly safe bet for the playoffs, sitting at 19 and 14, currently at the 5 seed, right behind the Phoenix Mercury, who are 19 and 12. So same amount of wins. Vegas has just played 2 more games and lost them. So what are you seeing from them? Have you been surprised at all by the turnaround, or is it more like this is more the Aces team we were expecting to begin with?
I mean, I have been at least a little surprised because they've been so bad by their own standards for most of the season. Um, I don't think. I mean, Jewel Lloyd has obviously played better off the bench. I don't think that's made a massive difference to how the team has played in general. But that switch has obviously helped because you can't ignore that they're 7-1 since they made that switch. That I thought last night was the first time I've really seen a game where that performance seemed like it wouldn't have been out of character in their previous couple of years.
Mhm.
That was the first time this season that felt like a proper Aces game where they played a top team, they went toe to toe with them. Wilson got key plays when it mattered, and they pulled it out. And I mean, the numbers, if you look a little deeper into them, their defense statistically isn't much better in this stretch than it's been most of the season. It's where the difference has been the offense.
Mhm.
That's what's actually like keyed this run. Also, to a certain extent, it's a bit of a lucky stretch in that if you look at sort of net rating, they're better. They're definitely better than they've been most of the season, but they're not great yet. And I mean, just to go back to what we were talking about already, I looked up what net rating is since the 27th of July, which is when Vegas made the switch to put Lloyd on the bench. And it's also basically the same date that Stewart got hurt in New York. And New York, Golden State, and Seattle all have virtually identical net ratings. And New York are 4-5, Golden State are 6-3, and Seattle are 1-6 in the exact same stretch. So statistically, just from sort of point difference and pace, they've played the same level, and that just shows you how this can play out. Vegas are 5.5 plus 5.5 for that stretch, which is a big jump for them from their sort of -1 that they've been playing at and floating around most of the season. So they've put something together. They found something. I'm still not totally a believer that this is a contender team. I think this is now a team you're a little bit worried about that might pull
Mhm.
a playoff upset rather than a team that might win a championship. I think there's another level if they wanted to actually contend again this year.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that to me goes back to the critique that I've had of the Aces for multiple seasons, which is just not building up enough depth, not building up enough of a supporting cast where, okay, you start to have some success and it's because Jewel Lloyd, one of your stars, is finally getting productive. But I still don't know that they've built up enough other options for a deep playoff run. As we all know, having a bench is really, really crucial in the playoffs, especially when we're seeing some extended series this year. Like if you're going to win the championship, you're going to have to play more games than you have in the past. So I think that that is a pretty fair assessment. I definitely think there's been some interesting sort of wrinkles as far as, yeah, we're seeing them, I think, place a bigger emphasis on making sure that they're shooting the three, making sure they're getting good looks at the three, to make sure that they're forcing the defense to spread out a little bit. We saw Asia Wilson withstand the kind of defense we've seen consistently against her because of just how impossible it is to stop her. But a very uncharacteristic shooting night, 3 of 14 from the floor, but makes all 11 of her free throws. And as you said, when her team needed it, showed up. I mean, just a very vintage look from Asia Wilson to close out the game, willing her team to a win with the offensive rebounds. I think 5 for 6 offensive rebounds were in the fourth quarter, and most of them basically in the closing minutes of the game. Had 17 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, no turnovers, only had 1 foul. I mean, again, these are numbers that people simply don't put up unless you're Asia Wilson. But then when you get 3 other double-digit scores, when you have Jewel Lloyd as the leading scorer off the bench with 21, shooting over 50% from the floor, I think that's really, really crucial for them, as well as double-digit scoring from both Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young. I like that. I still just feel like that 5th starting spot is always going to be a little bit of a mystery because you had Kirsten Bell in there. Okay, that's different. I initially thought when if they were gonna switch up the starting lineup, I would have thought they would have put Dana Evans in there to begin with. I think part of that too is like a matchup thing with the height you have in your starting lineup. But I think that maybe makes a little bit more sense going forward, as far as just someone who is gonna be giving you a little bit more consistent production. You're still just you're not getting a whole lot off the bench. You don't need everyone scoring double digit points, but to have Jewel come in for 21 and then you only get 3 more points off the bench, I don't know that that's going to be enough for a deep playoff run, but I definitely think it's enough to get you into solid playoff position. And like you said, absolutely have the ability to pull off an upset.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you with the depth of this squad. I mean, it feels like, yeah, they haven't made the right moves to deepen that bench, and I, I mean, I have tried to investigate this. I have not got a straight answer from anyone. They've not used their replacement spot for Parker Tyus for the last month plus. There's a there's an open spot on this roster that they've not been using, as far as I'm aware, and I have no idea why. Um, they're over the cap, but that shouldn't be an issue with a replacement player, unless there's a rule I don't know about. But yeah, we'll ignore that for the time being because maybe there's a reason for it. But I don't know why a player like Kayla Charles didn't end up on this roster. We've seen her play well for multiple other teams and was sat around as a free agent for a while. Someone like that, someone who's just a fill-in who can play some defense and shoot a 3 if you kick it to her when she's wide open. Yet, because Kirsten Bell, we've got 3.5 years of evidence that Becky Hammond doesn't trust her to play that role. She's not going to be good enough in that position. And yeah, I wasn't surprised they switched it up last night, but I'm not convinced Dana Evans is the answer either. But where are they going to find the answer from at this point? You basically have to live with what you've got and try and work it out. Maybe they're still hoping that Parker Tyus is back and she gives them a boost going into the playoffs, but it's getting so late at this point that a player coming back like that, having not played for a year, coming off the pregnancy as well, it's hard to believe they're going to get much there.
Yeah, I mean, again, we talk about players coming in and having to get integrated, and that's talking about Emma Meesman, where she has been playing, she just hasn't been playing with this team, and so there's another level when you haven't been playing professionally. You've been training, and I mean, we've seen players come back and be contributors, but it takes time when you're coming back from a pregnancy, when you're coming back from being out for the extended period of time. So yeah, I think that that's a really interesting element and a really interesting thing to keep in the back of our minds where, okay, if at any point Vegas does make a move, potentially if that spot is there, as you say, barring whatever mysterious rules are behind the curtain, that would be really interesting. So something to keep an eye on there for sure. Last thing I want to touch on really, really quick is another point that was brought up from our friend Christian over at Off the Record, and that is that two of the top candidates for most improved player, Naz Hillman from the Atlanta Dream, as well as Veronica Burton from the Valkyries, played in the WNBL this past offseason. I thought that was a really interesting point. For anyone who follows international basketball, you know that Australian league, they have players, they develop players. I also was, interestingly enough, just talking about Naz Hillman last night with my mom because, very brief backstory, her aunt Desiree Hillman was the longtime athletic trainer at Toledo when my mother was there, when Bill Fenley was there. Very good family friend of ours, and so my mom is in Ohio and went and visited her aunt Des, and they were talking about just the development there. She was saying how, Naz has always been someone who goes a little bit against the grain as far as what you see in a lot of women's basketball players these days, which is she was about her inside game. She was about her ability to get to the rim, to be mixing it up in the paint. She wasn't really one who wanted to be outside shooting the three, but she said when she went over to Australia, they were really working on her mid-range game, looking to extend that range a little bit. And then that was sort of the stepping stone where when Smesko came into Atlanta, I mean, he said, if you're not shooting the three, like, you're simply not going to play. Like, even Brianna Jones and Brittany Griner aren't immune to that. So, like, if you're a 6'1" forward, you're going to be shooting the three. And now, I mean, we've seen obviously what she's been doing, the way she's been shooting. And then Veronica Burton, just the confidence and the playmaking has been tremendous. So we were talking, you don't maybe follow the WNBL as closely as your domestic leagues overseas, but it's always been a really solid developmental league. I don't think you're super surprised to hear that there's those alum that are really making these big strides in the W.
No, I think it's reflective of what we've seen with several players going overseas, whether it's Australia or Europe or China or wherever, that if you go there with the intent to improve, then it can help. That you're usually going as an import, you're expected to take on a heavier load than you would be as a player in the WNBA because you're going to be one of their stars. They're paying you to be one of their major pieces, generally speaking. So there's going to be a lot of requirements on you, and some players find that too much. Sometimes, players who are role players in the W are made to be role players. So then they go overseas, and the teams that are expecting them to take 15 shots a night, and they can't do it. But some players fit into that well, and it helps you develop because there's the responsibility put on these players. Naz Hillman took a lot of shots playing for Southside, I think, in the WNBL last year. She wasn't taking a lot of threes yet. I'm looking at
that was
numbers.
An Atlanta development, yeah.
Yeah, she was taking 2 per game, which wasn't a lot considering she was taking like 15 shots. But yeah, it helps you extend how you play if that's what you want it to do. We've seen it in the past. Players like Alicia Clark went overseas, transformed themselves, came back and became key players for WNBA teams as well. And yeah, Veronica Burton, I think, even more than Hillman, we maybe saw the signs of this in the WNBA last year, in that she looked good when Connecticut picked her up, and they liked her a lot. If you look back at the sort of mock expansion drafts I did, she was the only player I had being taken in both of the variations of the expansion draft, because if Connecticut were going to protect the 6 we thought they were going to protect, she was the obvious pick to take for Golden State. Because you could see the beginnings of someone who could run an offense, someone whose shooting had progressed to the point where teams couldn't ignore her anymore, because that was her problem coming into the WNBA. Teams sat 10 feet off her and just said, okay, take the 3. We don't care. We'll let you have that shot all night long. You can't do that anymore. She's a scorer. She's a distributor. She's a starting point guard in this league. And yeah, the WNBL can help people like several leagues in Europe can if you are determined to improve. There are other players who found ways to improve by staying home as well. Everyone needs their own path. Skylar Diggins is the alternative that always comes to mind first for me. Someone who never went overseas, stayed home, worked hard in a gym in the US, and got better herself doing that instead. But yeah, lots of players can use European or Australian leagues to get a lot better, and we've seen it, and that's a good thing for the W as well because it's a developmental league without having to pay for a developmental league. You're not
Mhm.
having to set up a G League like the NBA did to try and develop your own cast. And we don't know how much bigger rosters are going to get in this next CBA, so this may still have to be a path for a lot of players.
Absolutely. So, last point I want to make here. I'm not going to belabor this point too much because I think that it's been belabored since these were implemented. But I had to say after last night once again, I am so sick of the in-game interviews. I thought it was really funny when they have Becky Hammond on screen. She's answering a question, and of course, there is active play occurring. And so at a certain point, she literally just trails off mid sentence, is
Because yeah,
watching what's happening in front of her
she spotted
because
the other team was in a zone and she wanted to yell at her own team to do something with that zone. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, this is coming right out of a break. And so, of course, there's going to be an adjustment. Like, this isn't even within the flow of a game. And so I thought that that was funny in that moment, but also just like so indicative of how ridiculous these in-game interviews are. Like, there's maybe a couple coaches you ever get anything from. Like, Sandy Brondello comes to mind as someone who usually like actually answers the questions and is a pretty good sport about it. But I think there's a really significant distaste from a lot of coaches that they have to thinly veil or not sometimes for these because it's simply ridiculous. This is they're professionals. They're doing their job and you're doing this in game. I think it is just unnecessary and ridiculous and it's just gotten so annoying. I'm glad that coaches like Becky Hammond, like, yeah, trail off, quit talking because you're trying to do your job. Like, if you're in a point where you feel like you could answer the questions and still be doing your job, fine. But if you have to focus on what's going on in the game, yeah, that's your priority. And so I just thought that was a wild sequence there. And I I don't know that we will see them go away just because I think that ESPN has kind of doubled down on it, even though a lot of viewers have expressed that they aren't huge fans of it, but it just never gets less ridiculous.
It feels so avoidable as well.
Yeah.
We're coming off a break. Why could you not talk to them for 60 seconds during the break and just play
Yeah.
that tape while we're watching the game? That
The
I
things
mean,
they've
that's what
done
they
for
that's
years.
exactly that's what they've done a lot of the time anyway. Yeah. So yeah, it feels really unnecessary, and we all hate it. I have
Yeah.
had the argument made to me that ESPN doesn't mind that we all hate it because that means we're all talking about it. And as long as we're talking about something they're doing, that's good as far as they're concerned. It's the no news is all news is good. No news is no news is bad news. What you know the phrase I'm trying to come up with. As long as we're saying something, then they don't care.
Publicity
They
is
don't
good
care.
publicity.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. So yeah, why they don't mind. They'll happily let us complain as long as we continue to talk about what they're doing.
You're right. All right. Hey, be back. Hop in here. You have a take on this.
I agree 150%. I agree. In fact, you talked about Becky Hammond. I go back to a time last year when Debbie Antonelli, who I have a, you know, good close bond with, was asking a question and something happened on the floor. Becky didn't hear the question and she had this look on her face reacting to what happened on the floor, but it looked like she was reacting to the question. And it made for an awkward 10 silent seconds. And I said, this has to end.
Yeah.
This is terrible. In fact, shockingly, I'm gonna say somebody that did a good job was Chris Koklenis the other night. I thought his was decent, but I also think he's scared to death to do anything wrong at this point because somebody's going to call for his job. So
Mm.
Mhm.
they got to go away. Like y'all said, I think they should go back to recording during the break and then playing them as play is going. I
I mean,
thought that worked
they're
well.
still doing that with those interviews
Right.
that they do with the players, where you see the action going on and someone they're interviewing is on the court. So this
Right.
obviously isn't simultaneous. And yeah, why can't you do that with these interviews with the coaches? So yeah, the whole thing's a joke. But
It could all be
unfortunately, we're
simpler.
still putting up with it.
Yes.
Yes. All right, folks. Well, we're gonna call it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you can find us on social. Richard Cohen at Richard Cohen, primarily on Blue Sky. You still pop over to Twitter once in a while?
Yeah, when I need to say
Yeah.
something important or tell people a rule or something, yeah, I post on Twitter as well, and then I get responses from Indiana Fever fans and immediately leave again, unfortunately.
You're so right. You can find me. I'm at Jay Steyz, JSTEYZ. You can find BMAC at BMAC1435. And make sure that you're following Her Hoop Stats platform everywhere you are on social media at Her Hoop Stats. Subscribe to our newsletter. Subscribe to the podcast. We'll be back at you tomorrow. And then, of course, as always, next week, we're here every weekday. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.